Welcome everyone to the Preschool Neuroscience Summit. Today I'm really excited to have Joree Rose with us from Journey Forward. Joree's a licensed marriage and family therapist, a mindfulness and meditation teacher, author, a speaker, and a coach. She's done so many wonderful things for children and for parents and just for adults in general, I think, through her work. I really recommend you follow her on Facebook and Instagram. She posts really wonderful and supportive messages and meditations that you can follow. She also has a podcast, Journey Forward with Joree Rose. And she has some children's books, so we'll have the links to those books. But one thing I wanted to mention, which is very relevant for this audience and this summit, is she has a new parenting membership site coming out called Journey Forward to a Peaceful and Productive School Year, where she'll be giving training and resources and journal prompts and doing Q&A to support parents through this COVID journey and going back to school. So we'll put the link to that so you can check that out. But she's given a freebie of a patient parenting mini course to you all, so you can check that out and listen to that audio course that she's provided. So welcome, Joree, and thanks so much for coming on the summit.
Thanks so much for having me, Helen. You know, it's so wonderful to be here. And, you know, we've been connected for years in the work that we do that's so aligned. And I love how the intermix of our work keeps bringing us back together. So thank you so much for having me back on to your summit.
Thanks so much, Joree. So let's talk about this new crazy time in history. It's
a strange world we're living in right now.
It's, you know, the last time we talked, it was the beginning of this kind of crazy period, and it's kind of gotten bigger and more substantial. So how do we come to terms and make this our new normal?
You know, it is such a challenging time for both parents and kids. And as mindfulness being the root of the tools that I teach, I think the biggest thing that keeps people stuck is thinking, oh, I just can't wait till life goes back to normal. I just can't wait till life goes back to normal. And what that's actually doing is it's drawing people continuously into the past, which is taking them out of acceptance of right now. And I think one of the best ways we can develop more resiliency and adapt to all of the craziness that we're living in is to just accept this is our normal right now. And it's not going to last forever, but it is going to be different, right? I mean, I kind of equate it to the post 9/11 world. You know, before 9/11, we would get on an airplane, we would have people walk us to the gate, we'd go to the gate to pick people up. In fact, just recently I was watching a movie with my daughters. I've got 2 teenage daughters. We were actually watching Sleepless in Seattle. They love watching some of the old time movies that were my favorites growing up. And in the movie, you know, Tom Hanks and his son take the girlfriend to the gate of the airport to say goodbye. And my daughters don't know that world.
Right.
You know, but to me, that's what I grew up with. That was normal. And then after 9/11 happened, we all thought, how are we ever going to get on a plane again? How are we going to travel with ease? How am I going to feel safe and secure? And there was a period of time in which that never felt like it was going to be possible. And then we adapted. And now we know the new normal is what it takes to go through security, where you have to be able to pick somebody up at the gate or not. And we don't even think twice about it. Yeah. And now these kids, like my daughters, don't even know what it was like pre 9/11. But there was a period of time in which the world felt so insecure and unstable that we all had this heightened anxiety until we adapted. Okay, so what do we do now that things are different? And I think now with COVID, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. The more we, you know, lament over how life used to be, the harder it's going to be for everybody right now. Mm-hmm. The more we can accept this is the way things are, and how can I begin to relate differently to the present moment without getting stuck in a lot of fear and anxiety of what's to come. right? Because the mind gets pulled in different directions. It's going to go to past, where it's going to ruminate, or it's going to go to the future, where it's the anxiety and the what ifs and the unknowns. And so the way to manage is to say, okay, so this is what's happening right now. And acceptance is key. Now, this is a question, Helen, I ask, or I get asked by all my clients as the biggest piece of this part is, how do I accept what I don't like?
Yeah.
And not accepting it doesn't make it go away. In fact, not accepting it actually makes your reaction to it bigger. It makes your resistance to it bigger, which is going to increase the angst and anxiety. And so the best thing we can do in this current COVID world, we can't even say post-COVID, we're in it right now, is to just say, okay, I don't like it. This is weird. This is bizarre. This is not normal. And this is normal for what it looks like in fall of 2020.
Yeah. Yeah.
Easier said than done. Like everything is easier said than done, but to continue to recognize it's also not a one and done, right? This is a practice you have to continuously come back to again and again and again, because the mind is going to want to keep pulling us in either direction. And we've just got to say, okay, I see where my mind has gone. It's understandable. I can have compassion why I'm ruminating or why I've got anxiety, and I can just bring it back.
Yeah, great advice there. So what about children? So we're experiencing, as you said, being pulled into the past and present. How can we really help kids to get, be in the present in this challenging time as well,
and also
kind of bring our anxiety to our kids?
Yeah, and to feel safe, right?
Yeah.
This is gonna be I have a long answer, and I'm gonna preface it with something that came up last year as an entree into this answer. So I live in California, and there's now our new normal being in California is recognizing that wildfires are part of our reality. And we're actually in the midst right now of a bunch of Northern California wildfires. We had really bizarre weather earlier in the week that was lightning storms, which we just don't get here in California. And the lightning sparked, I think, 367 fires around the state.
Wow.
And right now, I can't even go outside because the air quality is so poor. There's ash in my backyard, even though I don't live near any of the fires. So it feels dystopian to walk outside. And last year, when we were in the midst of wildfire season, I actually was on the news on a major LA, Los Angeles news station, and talking about how parents can talk to kids about what I'm calling disaster anxiety. Because when you turn on the news, and it's the same for COVID, right? When you turn on the news and you see all these horrible stories, or you see, whether it's for us right now, the wildfires, or whether you're seeing people on ventilators, or people who are talking about family members who have died, or the stress of kids not being able to go back to school in a regular school setting, or parents being furloughed or off of work, like the anxiety is real. And parents, out of the goodness of their hearts, want to protect their kids. And mostly want to protect them from feeling fear, or they want to make them feel safe. And so a tendency is to want to just nurture the fears by saying, oh, honey, don't worry, it's going to be okay. Don't you worry about it. Here's the problem. And this is when I was, why I brought up the wildfires, because you can tell that to a kid, but they can walk outside and see that it's not okay, right? And kids want to trust their parents. And if they're not feeling okay in their body, right? And anxiety and fear and depression and sadness has a physiological component. Sometimes with kids, they even don't know how to name exactly what they're feeling as their emotions, but they understand their physiology. They've got a pit in their tummy, right? Or they feel like they can't breathe, right? Usually for kids, it manifests in their stomach. We don't know how to differentiate for sometimes with what their tummy ache actually is. But whether it's headaches, loss of appetite, a tightness in the chest, difficulty sleeping, you know, that tummy ache with the anxiety, it's going to manifest physiologically for kids. And because parents want to comfort their kids, they're going to say, oh, honey, don't worry, it's going to be okay. But like I said, you know, right now, anyone out here can walk outside and say, but it's not okay. So if the kid knows what they feel and their parents saying, don't worry, they now have this cognitive dissonance because they're like, wait a second, I'm feeling one thing, but I'm being told not to feel it, or I'm being told not to worry about what I'm feeling. Because it's my belief the absolute last thing anybody, not even just a kid, right? The last thing anybody's ever going to do when they're told to not worry is actually not worry, right? The last thing anyone is ever going to do when they're told to relax and calm down is actually relax and calm down. Like, nobody's going to be like, oh, I never thought of that as an option. Thank you for telling me to calm down. Like, you know, that's just never going to happen. Yeah. So it's interesting because just this morning I reposted on my Facebook that news spot that I was on, because I think it is just as relevant no matter what the topic is, because this disaster anxiety is real and kids are internalizing it. And the reason they're internalizing it in large part is because emotions are contagious and they're picking up on what their parents are feeling. And let me tell you, this is a really stressful time. I mean, so I'm in California. We are one of the states that since the beginning of COVID, our governor was pretty conservative. And as a result, we had lower numbers than other areas in the state for quite a while. And, you know, our school year stopped abruptly mid-March, and no one ever thought we were going to be off of school this long. Yeah. You know, we stopped in mid-March thinking it'll be a couple of weeks and then everything will go back to normal. Yeah. Well, here we are. It's mid-August as the moment that we're recording this. And my kids started school last week. We're 100% remote. So the anxiety is real because we've got parents who are furloughed. We've got kids who are doing school from home. You know, all of our restaurants right now, there's no indoor dining. Everything is outdoor dining. But right now with the air quality, people can't even be outside. Businesses are closing right and left. The disaster anxiety is real. So how can parents not be feeling this? Well, understand emotions are contagious, and especially anxiety. It's contagious. So if you're feeling as the parent overwhelmed, anxious, and stressed, and your kid expresses some level of insecurity, and you tell them, don't worry, honey, it's going to be okay, when you're stressed about the realities, I think it dismisses the kid's emotions, and it fails to create an opportunity to connect compassionately, empathically, and maintain an ability for the kid to express vulnerability. Because if they're just told, relax, calm down, don't worry, it's going to be fine, that feels dismissive. Yeah. And eventually it's going to cut off communication between parent and child. And being a therapist for years, I've seen this happen because the child learns my parent isn't always safe to talk to, or they only want me to talk to them when I'm feeling good. If I have some difficult emotion, they're just going to say, oh, honey, don't worry, it's going to be fine. Yeah. So that was the long entree into what can parents actually say. But I think that context is really, really important, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what they can actually say is very simple, and it scares parents to say it. And I'm going to explain what to say and explain why it's scary for parents. I advise clients, any parents, all you out there listening, to actually acknowledge everything your child is feeling, validate it as real. Yeah, honey, this is really scary right now, isn't it? Yeah, this is a really bizarre time. Yeah, it's really scary to walk outside and see the ash and smell the smoke in the air. Yeah, I get it. It's really hard to not go back to school right now. Like my daughter's like, she's a freshman in high school. She's like, how do I make new friends if everything's remote? If I say, oh, don't worry, honey, you'll make friends, don't worry about it, I'm not validating her pain over how do I do this, nor am I guiding her in how to actually do it, right? So I want to advise parents to name and acknowledge exactly what your kid is expressing as real and valid and simply understandable as related to the situation that we're in. Here's the reason parents don't do this. They fear if they actually name what their child is feeling, that emotion is going to grow and grow and that it won't be able to be contained. The reason parents say to kids, relax and calm down, is because they're trying to contain it from taking over. Yeah. It actually does the opposite effect, because then the kid's going to ruminate more, which will just cause more of the emotion and thoughts and fears to grow. So it's counterintuitive, it's paradoxical that to actually acknowledge and speak directly to and honor and give space and hold the container for what they're experiencing and feeling as real and valid, that is actually the key to quieting down that emotion, to calming down the fear. Because then once the child feels validated, what's actually going to happen is their emotional brain will calm down, giving their brain an actual ability to access their resources on, now what do I do when I'm feeling anxious? Because if we're feeling anxious, we can't activate our tools, different parts of the brain. And the emotional brain takes over and it shuts down the part where the tools are. And more importantly, for parents that are dealing with kids with remote learning, I mean, I mentioned to you, Helen, as we began, I had a woman comment on one of my Facebook posts who have 6 kids at home, ranging from kindergarten to 9th grade. And they're all home doing remote learning, right? So how we relate to the experience is going to impact our ability to get through the experience. And it's scary for parents to name it. And it's actually the key to calming down any of those emotions. It's the key to quieting down the brain from becoming reactive, and it creates greater connection between the parent and child, which I don't know about you parents out there, but I know every parent I've ever spoken to wants better connection and deeper connections with their kids. Yeah. Validation of what they're feeling is one of the best ways to get there.
Wow. Great, wise advice there that we can.
It was a little long-winded, so I'm sorry, but it all goes together.
Yeah, I think it was important to put the whole context there, and great explanation. So, Joree, let's dive in a little bit more into mindfulness itself, and why does mindfulness work? Why is it so helpful in this kind of situation when we're trying to manage our stress and anxiety?
Yeah, I think mindfulness is key in all of this, Helen. Honestly, I feel back when COVID hit, I felt like it was the universe's call to say, all right, everyone, let's all practice some mindfulness together. The time is here. There's no more excuses. This is our call to action. Because to me, mindfulness, and I say this lightly and not so lightly at the same time, I honestly feel like mindfulness is the answer to everything. Whether you're sitting in traffic or dealing with cancer, or now dealing with a worldwide pandemic, it's about how you accept or resist it. It's about how present you are versus getting stuck in the past or fearing the future. And it's about acknowledging whatever is arising and just accepting it, right? It is what it is. To say it is what it is not dismissing what it is. It's a deep wisdom to acknowledge, yeah, this is just what's here. So to me, mindfulness is the ability for us to respond and not react to everything, to our thoughts, to our emotions, to our sensations in our body, to, our kids, to our coworkers, to our own fears, whatever it is. Mindfulness is that tool set, is the framework, is the context to say, let's just be present right now. Because the more we get out of the present moment, the harder it is, right? Because we're ruminating about the way things were, or we're worrying about how it's going to be. And right now in this moment, even though contextually it's hard, we're already getting through it, right? And we can use a basis of meditation, of grounding with our breath, or grounding into the body, or grounding into the present moment, as a way of strengthening our muscle of the brain, so to speak, like going to the gym and doing a little mental workout, to be able to strengthen those neural pathways to make it easier to come back into the present moment, right? So it's kind of like, I explain, you know, our mind is like a hyper puppy, and it's going to run all over the place. And I actually have a puppy now, so I actually have a real relatability to this explanation that I used to always say before I actually had a puppy. And my puppy's name is Buddha, so it really, you know, resonates.
Yeah.
But, you know, we don't get mad at the puppy, we train the puppy. And we put the puppy on a leash, and we use the leash to bring him back. And to me, mindfulness is all about awareness, right? It's compassionate awareness of what's arising in the present moment. It's not judging what's arising, it's just honoring it's what's here. But as soon as we're aware of whatever is arising, it gives us the tool to say, okay, so how do I want to respond to it? And so just like that hyper puppy, if my mind wanders to fear, to anxiety, to depression, because there's also a lot of depression going on right now with COVID. There's a lot of grief occurring right now with COVID. There's collective grief, which is causing depression. The CDC just this week came out with a study. I think it was 40% of people since COVID are experiencing some mental health, and 10% have experienced suicidality. I mean, these numbers are astronomical. So mindfulness is a way to manage the very real mental health challenges that people are experiencing as a result of COVID. But when we begin to wander all over the place, our awareness is to be able to say, oh, look, there my mind went. Like, oh, look, there the puppy goes. And my awareness and my breath are the tools I can like bring it back, like pulling the leash back to say, okay, just come back right here. Okay, there it goes again. Okay, let's just keep bringing it back and keep bringing it back. And so it's the ability to be present, to respond and not react, to accept what is, to not ruminate, to not fear the unknown, and to use a meditation practice as the foundation of strengthening that muscle. And a meditation doesn't have to be long and drawn out. And, you know, it's simply a matter of creating space for stillness and silence, whether you're connecting to your breath or your body or an external object, like something you're looking at, or a candle or a sound or a mantra. And we can strengthen the tools to be able to have this greater presence.
Yeah. So I agree. I mean, I think it's the answer for so many things as well, just from my own personal experience. And that's why I want to share this with everyone I meet and all the kids I work with. And I think it's so powerful, right?
It is so powerful. And, you know, it's the easiest thing to do. It's the hardest thing to remember to do.
Yeah.
In fact, it was really funny. I had a client earlier in the week, and my two favorite tools that I'll give are, you know, whatever's arising, stress, anxiety, fear, depression, whatever it is, there's two ways to counteract it. Breathe, because as you breathe, it's going to activate the rest and digest part of your brain. So it's going to calm you down, getting you out of that fight, flight, freeze and reactivity. So even if you don't think the breath is going to work physiologically, the breath is still going to help. Yeah. Although if you have really big anxiety, the breath is hard to access and might activate your anxiety. So that would be a good point to maybe not breathe or focus on your breath and be ground into your feet or to your hands or an external object. But the second one is to just name it. Wow, I'm noticing I'm really anxious right now. Right? The same thing we do for our kids. We name it, like we acknowledge it. Because studies show that when we acknowledge it, it quiets down the emotional alarm of the brain. So I was telling this client, you know, breathe and name it. And he's like, I don't mean to insult you, but like, that's really simple advice. I'm like, it's ridiculously simple. Like, yes. And it's also hard to remember to do.
Yeah. I know.
And it's possible, but it's possible.
Yeah, exactly. I love what you just said. That's so true. Yeah. So just before we finish, Joree, what we have like lots of people, I mean, depending how many kids you have or how many people are working from home, but we're kind of all in the house together, and we, as you said, emotions are so contagious. What are your kind of top tips for just keeping the home a peaceful and kind of happy place to be, reducing that stress that can build up so easily?
Yeah, well, you mentioned in the beginning, and thank you for mentioning it, the parenting membership that I've just launched that you'll have all the links for. But the reason I'm so passionate right now about getting these tools out to families is because bottom line here's the thing. Like, if I'm just like nailing it down to the most root issue is, like we said, emotions are contagious, and we've got a lot of anxiety going on, right? This is what we know. And there's a lot of people around the world that are having alternative school years, right? My kids are 100% remote right now. And I signed a declaration that even if the school goes back in session, I'm not sending them back this year, right? COVID's been too big in California. They don't need to go back to school. I don't want to be the guinea pig. And so I know my kids are going to be home all year long. We don't know when any hybrid learning is going to occur, right? Some schools around the world have hybrid where they're partly in school, partly at home. Some kids are back in school altogether, but there's new social distancing restrictions. So even if your kids are back in school, there's anxiety because there's probably restrictions on, you know, simple things like, how do we be in a cafeteria? How do we can't go on a field trip. How do we go on a bus anymore? How close do we sit to the people next to us? How do we, you know, like, I know when they were considering being back in school, the restrictions were so big, like desks 6 feet apart, no group activities, no lunch cafeteria time. Like, that to me didn't sound like a conducive place for learning, right? If we're setting the restrictions, they were going to put plastic partitions next to every sink in the bathroom. I mean, there's a lot of realities that even if your kids are back in school, it's still not normal. And it's still unknown, right? This pandemic is not over, and it many places keeps growing. So here's what it comes down to, bottom line, is I'm really passionate about how can parents create the conditions to prime their kids' brains for learning. Because not only are emotions contagious, but I said a little bit earlier that when our emotional brain gets activated, it shuts down the part of our brain where our resources are, right? So emotional brain goes up, executive functioning goes down. Simple brain science. The executive functioning is where we have focus, attention, language, communication, learning and retaining information, decision-making. So if the energy in the home is amped up and full of anxiety and angst, that's not going to help your kids learn, whether they're at home or whether they're at some form of, you know, hybrid learning or in schools. So the best thing parents can do if they want their kids to have a good school year in which their kids are able to be present at school, whether they're doing it at home or not, if they want their kids to be able to learn and to be able to get the most out of they can out of their education, it's all going to start with, what is the energy in your home? It has to start there. So the ways that parents can shift into a more peaceful and ultimately productive school year for their families, and, you know, even for the adults in the home who are working from home, is to, one, normalize any emotions. Like I said, I'm going to go back to normalizing it, right? So we're looking for ways of how can we calm down the energy. So normalize and naming that whatever anyone is feeling is understandable. And this means parents have to get vulnerable in expressing to their kids their own anxiety. That's not going to make the kids more anxious, right? But if the parents are being stoic and always holding it together, it's teaching the kids to be stoic and hold it all together. I don't think that's a healthy form of parenting. I think emotional expression is the way to actually create more peace and calm in the home. So normalizing the experience, communicating around, you know, creating space to talk about emotions and feelings. Because when we can create the space for it, we can strategize what are our resources we can draw upon when we're feeling these different things, right? And for parents, most importantly, what are you role modeling to your kids? How are you role modeling responding and not reacting? Because let me tell you, it's not a judgment. It's an observation that I see in a lot of clients I've worked with over the years. Parents are really reactive when they're asking their kids to be calm. So if you are concerned about creating an environment in which your kids can have a peaceful and productive school year, and not to mention if you're working from home, so you can have a productive time with other people working in the house. Some of this is super logistical. Like, how are you going to manage if, let's say, dad's in the office and the printer's in the office and the kid is doing remote learning in the other room and has to print something and the printer goes off and the kid has to walk in dad's office, but now dad's on a call. Like, we got to be a little bit adaptable to interruptions, to, you know, okay, the Wi-Fi goes out. How are we going to handle this? How are we going to handle food all day long? I talked to a woman the other day who was having so much anxiety thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be having to prepare meals all day long because I got to make my kids breakfast at 8 a.m., prepare a snack for them at 10, make them lunch at 12. She's like, how am I going to get anything done all day? Like, these are some of, so there's like the conceptual plan, and then there's like the logistics around how do you manage this? And I said to her, well, let's expect this to be, you know, a normal routine in such a way that prepare all the food in the morning like your kids are walking out the door to school, leave it in the fridge with their name on it, and let them be responsible for going and getting it. You don't have to be in charge, because another challenge a lot of parents I see are facing, especially moms, the story, a very familiar story that many moms tell themselves is, to be a good mom means I ought to do everything for my kids. And right now with kids at home with remote learning, this is causing a lot of extra added pressure on mom. And if mom has anxiety, kids are likely picking up on that. So my advice to all you moms out there, you are not doing yourself or your kids any service by doing everything for them. It's making you depleted, and it's not teaching them responsibility and accountability. And even a 5-year-old can be accountable for a lot if you teach them how and get them excited about being responsible, because it's possible. But these are some of the ways that people are adding more stress to their lives, thinking, my kids are home all day, I gotta do everything for them because they're home.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
there's so again, very conceptual plans, and then very logistical ways, all of which are going to impact the culture and the flow of the day-to-day in the home. Yeah. And you know, if you want your kids to learn through this COVID world that we're in, it's going to start with how are you managing your emotions and the environment in which we're all living in.
Great advice, and very, very practical things there. I'm glad you brought up the logistics, because I mean, it's so important to think about that, as well as you know, all of the emotional side of
things. Can I add
a
couple more logistics? Can I add a couple more? This is something again, I want to share, because I can stay really big, like the mindfulness piece. But for some people, until we get the logistics taken care of, they can't conceptualize doing it different, right? So I want to share just a couple of more, because I have, I went through these with some clients, and I did a Facebook video for this the other day. For especially young kids, it's going to be hard if they're doing any remote learning to sit in one spot all day long. So I'm advising parents, if you're home with remote or hybrid learning young kids, set up multiple different workspaces that they can move to throughout the day. Because if they were at preschool, or if they were at school, they'd be going from their desk to circle time, to another table, to outside, to recess, to the lunchroom. So you got to be able to create multiple little workstations that your kids can move around in to keep them going. So that's one. Two, a lot of kids have a lot of anxiety on Zoom calls. They don't know how to, I mean, kids are just learning social interaction, period. Now they have to interact on a computer screen, which is very strange and not intuitive. So I'm advising parents to practice Zoom calls with their family members, where the kid is actually needing to engage in conversation. Because this one client of mine, her 5-year-old is starting kindergarten. They had a pre-call with the teacher, and the little girl didn't say a word. Right. Now, I know kids are anxious in new settings. And so my client was like, am I supposed to speak for her? How long do I sit there and let her not talk? When do I jump in versus let it be silent? Like, it was really awkward. So practice having Zoom calls. Another thing, this is all bizarre world we're living in. Kids need to feel comfort and security. There's nothing wrong with having them have their lovey sit in their lap while they're on a Zoom call for school. What are the conditions you can make them feel more comforted, even though they're home, right? So I think that's perfectly acceptable. Having different sensory outlets to keep the brain active, because we know, expending energy is exhausting on our brain. Learning is tiring. Like when I studied for my exams that were 4 hours, that was draining on my brain. Zoom calls are draining. So we need to keep the child's brain awake. So, whether it's having a diffuser with essential oils to activate the senses, whether it's to have snacks nearby, or even some quiet spa music in the background, or chew gum or suck on a hard candy, different ways to activate the sensory experience will keep the brain alert, because this is all new and it's a draining experience for kids.
Yeah. Yeah, great. I love all of those things, but especially, the practicing on the Zoom calls, because it is just foreign, right? I mean, something that we would, advise against spending hours in front of a computer screen. And how do you do that? And how do you create that connection?
And this is a really tricky, I don't know what the right word is, ethical, moral, I don't know what the right word to say is, but a challenge parents are having, period, because the whole rhetoric has been limit screen time, limit screen time, limit screen time, limit screen time. And now my kids are on screen time. I mean, my daughter is on Zoom for school from 8:30 until 3 every day.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So it now becomes this interesting conversation. Well, how come I'm allowed to have screen time for that, but not for this?
Right.
That's a whole nother conversation,
yeah.
But it's interesting, parents, this is where we have to learn to pivot.
Yeah. It's the new normal, right? And we have to adapt.
And this parenting monthly membership is to be able to provide parents ongoing resources, trainings, and videos and meditations for both themselves and their kids. Journal prompts, because I think parents need to use this time to just slow down and reflect on their parenting, right? Because parents don't often make a parenting plan when they have kids, right? They just plan for the nursery and pick out clothes and figure out how to get a baby to sleep through the night. But we don't plan our parenting. And to be able to have ongoing support with me for the whole year, I'm so passionate, because people need these tools more than ever.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Joree, for coming on and sharing all that really great advice.
My pleasure. Absolutely.
Practical advice. And as I mentioned before, we'll have the links to all Joree's social media. Check that out, the free audio parenting course, and a link to her membership site, Journey Forward to a Peaceful and Productive School Year, which I know is going to help so many parents to get through this difficult time.
Yeah.
So
thank you so much. And let me just say, for those who are interested in joining the membership, I am going to be closing the doors on September 15th. So if it's something that, if any of what I said resonated with tools that I can teach you, and not just for you, for your kids, because all the tools are dual in purpose, right? They're not just for the parents, but they're for the parents or role model to the kids. So if it's something that you're interested in, don't hesitate, because as of September 15th, those doors will be closed. And I want to be able to just give as many resources as I can to as many people out there, because now more than ever, we as a humanity, we need it.
For sure. Well,
thank you so much for having me on, Helen. I so appreciate it. I hope that you stay healthy and stay well.
To talk to you again. Thanks.